particularly considering what programs there are in the US, there is zero justification for the amount of taxation that we have.
Right?
I mean, pretty much like I think it's somewhere around like 90% of our entire government budget goes to the military.
Are you serious?
And I'm like, we're not in the middle of a war.
I thought it went to pensions.
No, no, not even close. No, the vast majority is military, and it's not even military. What it really is government contracted businesses
Hmm.
like Boeing and Lockheed Martin. I know this because I know a number of people that work for these companies because I was born and raised just outside of DC and they stayed in the area, but they're government contracted and they get paid a ridiculous sum of money compared to the going rate for those same positions in the private sector. And also the amount of project managers and assessment personnel that just their entire job is just to see how things are going is astronomical. You'll
Yeah.
find 2 to 3 tiers of managers who are doing nothing but just assessing what's happening under them and then passing that on to the manager above them. And they're making 200K. And all because it's a government contracted deal. And if you have a government contract, it's the worst kept secret in DC that if you have a government contract, you charge the government 2 to 3 times whatever you would charge anyone in the private sector because they'll pay it.
It's not actually charging the government at that point, it's charging the taxpayers.
Exactly. Charging the taxpayers, but the government's the one that's paying it. So if
Yeah.
the government's like, oh, well, we just need more money, then they'll just tax more. It's not like they're going to run out of money. They run out of money constantly and they just pretend like they don't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's our budget deficit that we have every year, which is in the trillions of dollars now.
Well, that and we keep trying to fix other countries' problems and ignoring our own.
Yes, absolutely. And that's not to say that a complete isolationist approach is necessarily a good one because
No.
there are things that are happening in other parts of the world that will affect us eventually.
Yeah.
So it's important to keep an eye out for that. But also, there's a lot of band-aid fixes that are happening in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
Man, I could get into that topic for hours, but they're not trying to fix like the underlying issues that create those problems to begin with. In fact, the US is responsible for at least half of those problems existing in the first place.
Right?
Where we'll find a world leader that just disagrees with US policy. So we destabilize that government and then replace them with somebody that likes us. And then that person decides, oh, they don't like us anymore. And now we've got a dictator that's running a foreign nation that has no ties to the US. That it's just an insane situation. And then you get immigrants that are like, well, we can't live here anymore because we're under a dictator, and they come to the US hoping to find some kind of asylum. And then we get upset that they're coming to the US when we're the ones that destabilize their country. It's a complete disaster.
Because that's not the one issue. There are many advantages that are being taken by crossing that border.
Oh, absolutely.
And there are many different walks of life that are crossing that border. The destabilization of other countries should absolutely be paid attention to as much, if not more, as the people who are coming over here for other intentions.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing is that there is such a variety of issues when it comes to immigration and the reasons behind it.
It's also one of those issues that I really am like, you guys, there is no one solution for this. You need to break it down individually. Just saying, well, just open everything up isn't going to work. And saying, just close everything down isn't going to work.
Mm-hmm.
The pendulum is swinging too drastically. There needs to be a bipartisan agreement that is more central and pays more attention to the individual needs.
Yeah. Well, and I would agree it's not even central because what Democrats are trying to do and what Republicans are trying to do still both translates to not actually addressing the underlying issue.
Right.
So if you go between the two, that doesn't get you anywhere. That just gets you to even more of a mess.
But you would at least understand, right? If it was more, why are you here? Like if there were people actually addressing why people are coming to the borders, then it would at least get to the root of the problems.
That's exactly what it is. One of the biggest primary reasons that people are coming into the country whether it be illegally or trying to legally come in outside of political persecution and everything else, is that the only concern they have to worry about is getting caught by CBP or ICE. But if they don't get caught by the Border Patrol or ICE, then they're in the clear. I mean, there are enough sanctuary cities.
Why does it have to be in the clear is my question. Why can't you go through official channels?
Well, because you can't. I have a friend that lived in Orlando for many years, and her dad was a doctor, and her family was making a significant amount of sum every single year. And they tried and tried and tried to legally immigrate into the US. And the backlog is 5 to 10 years. It literally
Okay,
takes 5 to 10 years to become a citizen in the US.
that right there is a big issue then.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My suggestion, at least, would be two-pronged. First off, you need to clear the backlog. You need to hire enough judges, lawyers, everything to be able to process the amount of immigration cases that we have coming in because the backlog is insane.
Imagine that. You mean you're talking about creating more jobs? How dare you?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is you're creating more jobs that are government funded jobs, but they're not government funded jobs that require tiers and tiers of hierarchy where you're just throwing away money on project management.
Mm-hmm.
Like you would actually be addressing a situation and training people up to understand the nuances of law, to understand like everything that goes into the immigration process. So you're creating jobs. You're also dealing with the issue.
The immigration process needs to be humanized.
Oh, 100%.
Because some parts of the media would have you believe it's only sex traffickers. Other parts of the media
Right.
would have you believe it's only children with their poor mothers.
Right.
Both sides are BS.
Exactly. The other primary issue I would say that needs to be tackled, aside from the backlog, is employers. Because you're not going to come into a country where you don't know anybody, you have nothing going on, if you don't know that you can't find a job. Like, if Social Security laws were actually enforced, particularly in farm production, in cleaning services, in landscaping, all of the professions that you tend to find more people that happen to be illegal immigrants, it's going to be people that hire them knowing that they're not legally in the country. But
once they end up figuring out how to take our currency and turn it 100% into electronic, that will happen. Which is why bartering is illegal, right? Because it can't be taxed.
right. I will say that then you get into issues with too much government oversight and all kinds of things like that. The thing is, when ICE comes in and they raid a certain business, that business might be charged a small fee for hiring people illegally. But that business, 99% of the time, is well aware that they're hiring people illegally because you are legally required to check their social security card. You're legally required to check their birth certificate. If you hire somebody in the US, you have to confirm that they are a US citizen or that they are being gainfully employed legally in the US. But if they don't do that, there's not even a slap on the wrist.
Wherein like the other issue, when you don't do that, then the government doesn't know that you're here. Each state gets funded based off of population.
Mm-hmm.
Each school gets funded based off of how many kids are in that seat.
Yeah.
If they don't know you're there, they're not getting the money for you.
Mm-hmm. Which means that that money is then being split between more kids. You look at these big businesses, a bunch of them owned by senators, by presidents for that matter, that are employing illegal immigrants and nothing happens. And if there were severe tax penalties and or jail time for these employers, they would be a lot more strict on whether or not they're willing to hire people that are in the country illegally, because everything is about a push and pull. They're being pushed out of their country because of the conditions in that country, and they're being pulled into this country because they know they can come here and find work and have a much higher quality of living than they do the country that they're exiting.
Oh, yeah.
So if you take care of the underlying issue of destabilized governments in those other countries and reduce the pull into our country, you
Yeah.
have then made it so there's more incentive for them to go home to where they actually know people, to where they have lives, rather than
Mhm.
coming into the US where they don't have lives and they're constantly in fear of being sent to a completely different country from where the rest of their family.
There's no one fix, like I always say.
Yeah.
I think a good start would be the backlogs. I think it's ridiculous how long it takes to become a citizen.
Yeah. Agreed.
I think everybody would be way more willing to come in here into the Americas legally if it didn't take so long.
Hmm. No, I completely agree.
It's not like they're going to take our jobs. No, they're not. Fine.
I mean, just looking at like farming, for instance, farm owners in the US have the hardest time finding American workers to work their farms for a rate where they can actually pay them.
Right. Because American workers want to get paid, which is too low to actually live off of, but too high to actually pay.
Mhm.
But the amount of imbalance, I mean, it would really, really require an entire government overhaul because the amount of corruption and greed and nepotism, it is staggering.
This is kind of another example of how a centrist perspective is not always the best one. Is that look at some of the bipartisan agreements that Republicans and Democrats still have that they'll go hand in hand with. Like, neither of them have any interest in barring senators and House of Representative members from trading stock while they're in office. Like, because all of them know that's how they make all their money. They'll be on a committee and they will make money because they'll reach out to these businesses and or not reach out to the businesses, but just buy or sell the stock as benefits them right before they vote on it. And I mean, there's people whose job it is to determine where the vote's going to go before the vote ever happens. So the senators and the House of Representative members, they know whether or not these bills are going to pass. And so ahead of time, they're like, oh, well, if this bill passes, then these businesses are positioned perfectly to financially benefit from this bill being passed. So I'm going to buy a bunch of stock in them right before the bill is passed. And then I'll wait like a year or two and then sell it. Or I'll wait out of office and then sell it so that people don't understand that that's where all of my wealth came from because I got the wealth after I left office, but they really got the wealth because of what they did while they were in office.
Of course. That happens on both sides.
Oh, absolutely. There's zero difference between Democrats and Republicans as far as that goes.
No, I don't understand how that has to do with the centrist.
Well, because the centrist perspective typically is what's in the middle of the left and right wing viewpoints is what we should do.
Oh,
And if you're equating left and right wing viewpoints to Republicans and Democrats, it's like, well, both of them agree that they should be able to do this.
we both agree they should be able to do what is that inside trading?
Yeah, exactly. It's legal inside trading,
Oh yeah, yeah.
but only for people in office.
Okay, I was like, I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, sometimes we do need extreme changes, like you were saying. We need major overhauls when it comes to our immigration process. It's not just a few little changes here and there. Like, we need to completely reframe the way we think about it because it was pushed to its limit back before Obama got in office. And it's gotten worse and worse and worse every single year since then. It didn't get any better when Trump was trying to build the wall. It continued to get worse while he was in office. And then when Biden got in office, it even exploded more.
This has been a problem since I can remember.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like trying to stop a comet.
Hmm.
I mean, they're just watching it coming, going, oh, well.
Yeah. That's a good way of describing it. And I would say that's true with like almost every single thing that's going on lately. Like the government's just sitting there saying, nah, oh well.
Yeah, what are they going to do? What are they going to do about it? They can't do anything about it. And the whole time, the rest of us have our butts in the air, our hands on the ground, and we're just saying, all right, give it to us.
Right.
We can't do anything.
Yeah.
And they will come up to you and go, well, you can't do anything about it. And we're going to go, you're right. End of conversation.
One thing that I was pleasantly surprised by is that Congress, both in the House and the Senate, has a bill that they're trying to pass. Because one of the things that we were talking about earlier that you were calling out was the homelessness in LA and how the number of homeless people there is just staggering. And I think one of the primary driving factors of that is the cost of housing.
That it's the fact that, and this has been proven, was especially called out when the hurricanes 2003, 2002, Hurricane Katrina,
Hmm.
they bussed the inmates to California and let them out.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right after Katrina happened, the gang territories, the graffiti was awful. There were so many shifts, and it became apparent that a lot of other states will bus in their homeless, especially if they have aggressive weather, because the homeless were dying on the streets.
Yeah.
But instead of providing them some kind of shelter and reformation or rehabilitation, they just put them on a bus and said, "Want to go to Hollywood?"
Yeah.
And who doesn't want to come to Hollywood?
Well, yeah, I mean, because it doesn't get super cold, so you don't have to worry about dying of cold,
Right?
dying of exposure.
There's that. And then, of course, it's a sanctuary city.
Mhm.
But the whole thing that Newsom did with Kim Jong-un was the highest form of hypocrisy I've seen in a long time. Blatant hypocrisy when he cleaned up everything, because behind the scenes, none of the businesses were able to be reached. I guess he made local businesses, led them to believe that they would get all kinds of customers, and if they would do this, this, and that. I don't know all of the specifics, but I do know a lot of people ended up getting all around screwed that day.
Mm.
Slash week, slash however long Kim Jong-un was here.
Right. Yeah, it's not surprising.
But that's sad, isn't it? That it's not surprising.
Yeah, you would think like people who have better judgment, who, do the right thing, but it's all driven by self-interest, every single politician that we elect. I know we were just had the election here in LA, what, like last week, 2 weeks ago? And yeah, I just feel bad when I hear people constantly say they're always voting between the lesser of two evils or the less worse decision.
Well, and you have to, right? Because especially for me, as a libertarian, whom everyone hates, is going to vote libertarian. I can't vote libertarian.
Mm,
I have to vote, in my opinion, who the lesser of two evils are. So I have to go look at all of the policies, see where it affects me as a person, because let's be honest, I do have to protect my family and vote in that way.
yeah.
And the problem with that is that's what the politicians are also thinking. Well, bottom line, I have to protect my own.
Hmm.
In a way, of course, this is on a much smaller scale. I'm just as selfish as they are. And it's a huge problem in this country because everyone is.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like it's like the double-edged sword with democracy, right? I think that's why I always come back to, I mean, there's so many points I want to make right now. I guess there's that independence and the right of free speech and that freedom that we have, right? That we swear by and we want to uphold so much. But the thing with freedom is that it has to be freedom within limits. It has to be freedom to an extent, and it has to be reason behind it, right? You can't just go around just do whatever you want because then it's just pure chaos. There has to be order. There has to be a certain level of structure.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunately that anyone who's making points from the left, from the right, they're saying, well, they're destroying all of that, right? It's like, well, we're going to change the meaning of words. We're going to create new labels. We're going to restructure what's, been the standard or what people have come to accept. And we're just going to invent new things and just take the book of how everything was before and just throw it out the window. And yeah, which isn't too far off depending on the topic you're looking at. It's like, well, there is an issue. Because I always go back to an issue of mental health, right? Of like why people have more depression, anxiety than ever before. And I always kind of deconstruct and think of what's adding to that. And for me personally, the times where I've been the most anxious and the most uneasy is when I don't have a sense of direction. where I don't know up from down. We've been feeling a certain level of anxiety being out of work for as long as we've had, right? There's a sense of comfort in having, okay, I know I have a job tomorrow. I know I can pay bills. I know I can provide. I know I can take care of people I care about. When you can't do that, when you have a moment of helplessness, it really attacks you. It really affects you deeply. And it's unfortunate where I kind of feel like people want to keep us in that state of anxiety. They want us constantly just jumping at decisions without thinking them through. Jeremy and I, and, we want to think through every decision. That's why Jeremy said just being centrist or moderate isn't enough. It's, well, how do you want to tackle each given problem? Because each problem needs its own solution. And instead, politicians, it's like, well, here's this prop that has like 100 things on it. And they claim it's for one thing. It's really trying to address a bunch of other stuff as well. And it's like, why can't we tackle one thing at a time? Why can't we look at a prop, say, we like these things. Hey, we want you guys to take this stuff out because that's nothing to do with this.
They try to do that each time. You need to take this part out before we vote on this. And then they try and hide it somewhere else. And when I say they, I don't mean one side or another. I just mean a general they, whoever is making the proposition or the ridiculous language that goes into it.
Mm-hmm.
It is all such individualistic problems. It is. And I 100% agree. I'm not that person. I wouldn't know where to start, but I wish there was something implemented where we could pick somebody up off the street and go, what happened?
Yeah.
What are your needs? But then you also have the people who don't understand. Maybe they're mentally ill. By law, you cannot force them to get help.
True.
By law, if they want to be a transient, go for it. There is just something in some people that makes them incapable of integrating into society. And some people want nothing to do with society, but it's illegal to live off the grid. I personally don't have a solution for that.